Today, I will be going through and predicting the quarterback carousel for the 2023 offseason. Hey guys, what's going on? Matt O'Leary back with another video. I will be getting into the quarterback carousel. There should be a lot of moving pieces this offseason, whether it be guys who are pending free agents who maybe stay with their new team, or maybe a team is going through the NFL draft, or perhaps a team is going through and going to be making a trade. So that's what I'm doing today. I'm going through all the different teams who potentially could be in the market for a new quarterback and just talking through the scenarios and predicting where each team is going to go and whatnot. And we should be in for a fun one. Okay, so I'm going to start with teams that are going to retain their current quarterback, starting with the Seattle Seahawks retaining Geno Smith. Geno Smith has kind of turned into a career backup, or so we thought, after leaving the New York Jets. He hangs out with the Giants for a little bit, replaces Eli Manning in that controversial game. Then he was a backup for the Chargers, and then he's been a backup to Russell Wilson in Seattle. Russell gets hurt last year in 2021. He comes in and plays pretty good football, and then they trade away Russell Wilson, and he starts in 2022 and puts up a solid season. And it doesn't seem like the Seattle Seahawks are going to, go into the 2023 draft with a need at the quarterback position. Instead, I think they retain Geno Smith, do everything they can to bring him back, as they had a lot of success and we're a playoff team with Geno Smith at the helm. As for the New York Giants, kind of the same boat. They did not bring they did not have Daniel Jones at his fifth-year option, which was kind of understandable after his first 3 years in the league. He was going into a very important fourth year with Brian Daboll, a new coach, and he played really well. He got the Giants to the playoffs. They won a playoff game against the Minnesota Vikings. And he, too, I would expect to get paid, and paid pretty well. I thought he'd take a step in the right direction. Turnovers numbers went way down for Daniel Jones, which is one of his biggest issues. He was also able to stay healthy, which was another issue from him earlier in his career. But I don't see how the Giants don't bring him back. And kind of in the same boat as Geno, guy who was maybe supposed to be a stopgap, comes in, plays really well, gets his team to the playoffs. The Giants retain Daniel Jones. Next one is a little bit on the controversial side, not necessarily, but it's just someone who was linked a lot in a trade, and that's Lamar Jackson. I think the Baltimore Ravens are bringing Lamar Jackson back. I think they will franchise tag him and then get a long-term deal done with their quarterback. They've been talking all offseason about having Lamar be very involved in the offensive coordinator search, and you'd have to imagine that if he's involved in the offensive coordinator search, he's not going anywhere. If he was to get traded, I would think it'd be to an NFC South team, either the Carolina Panthers or the Atlanta Falcons. Both seem like a potential good fit for Lamar Jackson, but we'll see if anything changes there. But as of right now, I think Lamar ends up sticking it out in Baltimore. Also, last one before we get into the NFL draft, teams who are going to be looking at their quarterback through the NFL draft. I think the Saints bring back Andy Dalton and have him be the starter. They look like a team that could probably use some sort of a rebuild. I feel like they were in limbo last year. Like, they weren't a bad team. They weren't a great team. They didn't have their first round pick because of the trade. They traded up for Chris Olave with the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think now would be a really good time for them to maybe get in on the tank for one of the 2024 quarterbacks. So I think they run it back with Andy Dalton, tear things down a little bit, and they are looking to acquire their next quarterback of the future in 2024. Okay, so which teams are going to be looking at a new starting quarterback thanks to the NFL draft? We will start with the Texans, who I think move up a slot and end up taking Bryce Young. Right now they have the number 2 pick. I think the Chicago Bears slide back a spot. Maybe they throw in, what do they have, pick 12, I believe, right in front of the Jets, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe they just throw that pick in as well and just say, listen, we know it's a lot of value, but we really want to get our guy. We don't want to have to see a team trade up in front of us and take Bryce Young. So we'll move up a spot and take Bryce Young at that point. As for the Indianapolis Colts, they've gone the veteran route for a very, very, very long time after Andrew Luck retired. They had Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan. It is finally time for them to get in on drafting a young quarterback and trying to develop that guy. A little bit of in my opinion, a controversial pick because he's not my quarterback too. But I think the Indianapolis Colts are going to go with Will Levis. it very much so seems like Ballard likes to draft guys based on traits. And if they were doing that, Levis seems like he would be the pick. Again, CJ Stroud is my number 2 quarterback, but I don't think the Colts see it that way. My prediction is that Will Levis will be an Indianapolis Colt. As for the final team drafting a quarterback, who is going to have them start right away? And that is the Carolina Panthers, who I think ends up with CJ Stroud. I think they'll keep Sam Darnold as a bridge quarterback. They'll sign him on a cheap deal. Maybe he starts the season when things start to go poorly. They put in CJ Stroud. But I think the Panthers very desperately need to figure out that quarterback position after they let Cam Newton go. They've kind of had a bunch of rotating veterans, whether it be Teddy Bridgewater or Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold. It's time for them to get a young quarterback and really try to develop their own guy. And I think CJ Stroud would be a great fit there in Carolina. Before we get to free agency, wanted to remind you that BUSR and I are doing a $1,000 free bet giveaway for the big game. You have until February 6th, tomorrow, to enter. So all you have to do is sign up using my link, busr.com/Matt. If you do that, you are entered to win. You just have to make the minimum deposit and you are entered. You will get if you win, you'll get a call from BUSR, a congratulatory call, and you will also get featured in a video from yours truly. So please make sure to sign up. Okay, let's go to free agency and trade and, some of the bigger moving pieces. We will start with the Vegas Raiders, who I think they believed they were going to get Tom Brady, but with Tom Brady retiring, they will get poor man's Tom Brady, very poor man's Tom Brady, and Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy G and Josh McDaniels spent a bunch of time together in New England. I think he is a well-respected guy. As we saw earlier this offseason, San Francisco said there's not a scenario in which they're bringing Jimmy G back. As for San Francisco, they, I will imagine, will start Trey Lance at first, in next year because Brock Purdy's hurt. He's going to be recovering. Maybe they add a veteran like a Jacoby Brissett or that level of quarterback to quote unquote compete for the starting job. But I'd have to imagine that more than likely Trey Lance is going to be starting games to at least begin the 2023 season. And if things don't go well, they could, turn it over to Brock Purdy once he's healthy. But if things are going well, that was their original plan to begin with. So I think Trey Lance finally gets his opportunity next year, while the Raiders, they wanted to move on from Derek Carr, so they bring in a familiar face in Jimmy G, and maybe there's a world where they still believe they can develop something out of their guy in Jarrett Stidham. I don't know if that's likely, but hey, Jimmy G, at least when healthy, is a competent quarterback. Speaking of Derek Carr, I think he ends up going to the Washington Commanders. I think they are looking for a quarterback upgrade. They had Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke, and they were a pretty solid team. They just can't get over the hump because really the quarterback play isn't good enough. He'd be a significant upgrade there, and you'd have to imagine with that defense and the playmakers that they have at the wide receiver position, Terry McLaurin specifically, they should be able to be fine offensively. And I feel like that's a good landing spot for Derek Carr. It's not necessarily like the New York market. Going to an NFC team, a little bit less pressure, but I think he'd be solid. I think he'd be solid there in Washington. Okay, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They lost Tom Brady. What the hell do they do? I also think they're kind of going in tank mode. Kyle Trask could be the starter, but I think they signed Mike White. Oh no, Mike White is leaving the New York Jets. I think that's probably likely, and we'll talk through why I think that's the case in a little bit here when I make my prediction for who the New York Jets are going to get. But a Mike White, Kyle Trask tank for Caleb Williams, that seems pretty likely. Todd Bowles, I don't think is long for that job. He's going to be the tank master for one more year. I think if Tom Brady wasn't on that team, they probably win 5 or 6 games. And I think they're going to start moving some pieces out, whether it be like Mike Evans or Godwin or, guys like that. I think they're going to move some of the older players off that roster, go into a little bit of a rebuild. I don't see them in the market for a guy like Derek Carr. I don't think it's going to be a plug and play, bring another veteran in who's going to be competitive. I think they're going to try to get younger, maybe have a stopgap option like Mike White, or who knows, maybe they want to see what they have in Kyle Trask. But eventually I think the play is trying to be in that Caleb Williams conversation, which is another team in that division the New Orleans Saints are going to be looking to do, in my opinion. All right, finally, the New York Jets. Who did the New York Jets end up with? Aaron Rodgers. Just reading the tea leaves here. It feels like Aaron Rodgers has one of 2 landing spots, maybe 3. You throw in Tennessee, but the Jets, the Raiders, and Tennessee seemed like a good spot. When looking at the Raiders, they absolutely could be in the conversation with Devontae Adams, his former teammate, but they are a cash-poor organization. There was a report that came out earlier this year that they don't really have a ton of cash, which is what you're going to need because we know Aaron Rodgers' cap hit isn't really anything super significant next year. It'd be like $15 million, which I think is like 19th in the NFL for a quarterback cap hit, but he's due a lot of cash. The Jets owners, Woody Johnson, would be willing to spend the money on the quarterback position. So this just feels like a no-brainer. And then you could also sell the continued development of Zach Wilson. I don't really anticipate them just flat out moving on from Zach this offseason. I don't think there is much trade value if they even wanted to do that. Aaron Rodgers QB1, Zach Wilson QB2, and who knows, maybe you're selling it. It's a 2-year run with Aaron Rodgers, then maybe we can go back to Zach Wilson in year 5 and see if anything's there. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know how likely it is, but if there was ever a scenario for Zach Wilson to figure it out, I would think sitting behind Aaron Rodgers would be that. But yeah, so I'm going to have Aaron Rodgers be the New York Jets quarterback. They trade a second-round pick this year and a conditional 2024 first-round pick, which the condition is if he's on the roster at the start of the new league year, it is a first-round pick going the way of the Green Bay Packers. If not, it's some insert mid-round pick here for that spot. And lastly, the Green Bay Packers, they trade away Aaron Rodgers. Jordan Love finally gets his opportunity. It feels like the Green Bay Packers want to find out what they have there. And Jordan Love, they used a first-round pick on the guy. They had him sit for 3 years. They have to decide now whether they want to pick up his 5th-year option or not. I would assume probably not. But you got to see this guy eventually get on the field. You invested a high pick in him. It just feels like it's time for them to move on from Rodgers. Is it possible that Rodgers wants to come back and play with Green Bay? I guess it is, but eventually, like, it takes 2 to tango, and I think Green Bay would eventually like to see what they have there in Jordan Love. So that's my quarterbacks on the move. If I didn't mention a team, like, for instance, people might be saying, well, what about Atlanta? Well, I think Desmond Ridder, they're going to try to run it out there. Or what about Tennessee? Well, I think Ryan Tannehill sticks there. And maybe Malik Willis develops a little bit in the offseason. So if I didn't mention a team, they're going to stick with the quarterbacks that they currently have. But that's my quarterback carousel predictions. Let me know your quarterback carousel predictions down below in the comments. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am Matt O'Leary, and we'll talk to you next time.